Hello, I am Heather Butler. I am the Social Sciences and History Librarian here at South. And today we are going to talk about the difference between scholarly works and popular works. For this, we're going to be specifically looking at a scholarly article versus a popular news article. So scholarly just means that it's written by experts for like an expert audience. They're assuming that their audience already has a level of familiarity with the like research around a subject, and a popular audience article just means that it's written for a broader audience, for like the general population. So for this, our scholarly article is we have two different versions of it that we're looking at. The one we're looking at right now is if you use like a library database, it'll take you directly to this kind of format that has a PDF. And then if you found an article through like Google or Google Scholar, it'll take you instead directly to the publisher's website. So this is two different versions of the same thing. So some markers that we have for this being a scholarly work, one of the first things to look at is the information about the authors. So it gives us the authors, and it also gives us immediately the authors' like qualifications for how they're an expert in this topic. So we can see that they work at universities, so it's automatically giving us like this kind of reason why they have like the authority to be able to do this research and write it and publish it. We can also see that it has like an abstract, and further down it has the structure that you would usually expect in a scholarly article, where it tells us things like the methods that are used. Just these sections are very common when it comes to scholarly works. They're kind of structured in the same way to try to make it easier to find content. Another thing that this one has that's very nice, and not every scholarly article has it, but it actually gives us a timeline for the peer review process. So peer review process is something that a scholarly work should do. It's when the author's peers, other experts in the subject, first read, review, and have to approve something to be published before it gets published. So things get published for their scholarly quality, things get reviewed for their scholarly quality before they're published. So in this case, we can see that received, this is when the publisher received the initial submission of like, hey, I wrote this, can I publish it? This is when it was accepted, it passed it through peer review and was accepted, and this is when it was actually published. So for here, this is a very good signal that this has gone through the peer review process, so it has met a scholarly standard for being published. Very quickly, we can also look at the website version. So it has the same information just as an HTML version. And another thing that we can see looking at the website itself is that there aren't any ads. All of the space is dedicated to just the publisher's work. So none of these things by themselves are like necessarily like this is the one indicator that this is a scholarly work, but all of them together give us a good idea that this counts as a scholarly work. In contrast, we can look at a popular work. So this is something that's been written for the general public. We can see that one, it's published by a by a news company. We can also see that there are advertisements. The space isn't solely dedicated to things published by this company. We can also see that it isn't really emphasized who the author is. It doesn't really say who wrote this or like what authority they have to have been able to write this. It doesn't talk about like any education, credentials, any associations, anything like that. We can also see that it's missing the kind of like classic structure that we saw in the other one. It doesn't have an abstract, it doesn't have named sections. and then it has just a whole lot of ads. And all of this comes together for us to say, okay, this has a very general audience. It is not something that is written just for experts or just for people who are gaining the knowledge they need to become an expert. So this is just a good thing to keep in mind and use to evaluate your sources before you use them in research projects. And it's a good thing to check to make sure if, especially if popular sources are going to be appropriate for your research project. So good luck with your research. Thank you. Bye.